cheers to everybody. I hope you all have the wine in front of you. We clank a
Cheers,
glass
guys.
to the
Cheers.
camera.
Cheers.
Oh, I'm clinking. I've got two cameras going.
Clink. Clink.
Cheers. All right.
That's way too edible or drinkable.
All right. So we'll go around and Mick, starting with you. You're the first one on. What are you tasting on this?
Definitely getting a lot of acidity. I don't know. I need some more time with it. Come back to me.
All right, we can come back to you. So Lauren and Stephanie, what do you?
Unless you want to open it.
I think it's a really savory rosé.
Yeah.
Like, I really like that. So yeah.
Very savory rosé.
I get more perfumey and like a lot of nectarine right off the bat. I really like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely some stone fruit on it. I'm getting a lot of creaminess, almost like that malolactic fermentation coming through. I guess full mallow. If that did happen, I'm guessing that happened on this wine, but we'll come back to Jason on that. And then, so we've got Tim and Jessica, and who else is with you, Tim and Jessica?
Yo.
Meet Ilana. Chef Ilana.
Here with us.
So they're joining us. They drank this wine a couple weeks ago. So
we drink whatever you send us immediately.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
It's a problem.
So, from memory, do you recall what you drank? What you had?
It was extremely unctuous. It was round. It was lovely. Very dynamic.
All right, great, fantastic.
Thank you.
So one of the things we like to do, so Jason, like we like to go around. I mean, we're here to drink first and enjoy the wine, enjoy your company. But I always like to hear everybody's thoughts on the wine before before you introduce a bias with your with your take on it. So with that, I'm very happy to introduce Jason from Vinca Minor Wines. So Jason, why don't you introduce yourself a little, as well as talk specifically about this wine, and then we can get into some of the other wines that you produce.
Yeah, so I make wine for Vinca Minor. I started this in 2013. I'm based in West Berkeley. And so 2019 Carignan Rosé comes from Redwood Valley, Mendocino, which is just north of Hoplands. And, you know, they have a pretty incredible viticulture history. Most of the vines here were planted in the early 1900s, you know, so there's this really incredible history there. And viticulturally, you don't really have to use any sort of chemical or pesticide, herbicide in farming in Redwood Valley or all along in that valley. It's hot, it's arid, it's rugged. So Carignan thrives as a varietal there. And this is something that we've been working with since 2013. So we work with a grower, Pete Johnson. He's incredible. He actually lived in Berkeley. This is his family property. They've been there for 6 generations. And the vines just completely speak for themselves. I mean, we bring them in. This is old vine, dry farmed. What we do is we bring in the Carignan. We look at them almost as 3 different lots. We direct press one lot, so we just separate the juice from the skins right away. We take that juice, we ferment that. We take another third and we foot tread it. We let it soak for maybe a couple hours to pick up a little tannin, color, phenolics, just everything that comes from the skins. Then we press it, goes to stainless steel. And then we do that again, but we put that into neutral French oak to add weight and texture. So we have 3 components for this wine that we look at. I love making rosé, and I think it deserves more attention than just something that to be simple. And so we care a lot about rosé. We care a lot about the grape Carignan. And so this is probably year in, year out the wine that we geek out about the most.
Yeah.
Especially about process. We spend a lot of time thinking about the vintage. And this year is going to be a big rosé year. I think because
why is this year a big rosé year?
And I think we'll get into this later about the potential effects the fire have. I don't think it's a negative thing. I think there will be some issues, but I think there is a way to really bypass some of the negative effects, and that's going to be making really pretty rosé.
Yeah.
But this is something
Yeah. So let me ask you. So is this is you said your third? So a third you just press off the juice right away. A third you skim ferment for how long?
It's anywhere from 3 hours to 1 entire day.
Okay, so it's pretty quick. And then the third you skim ferment. I'm guessing for the same amount of time, 3 hours to 1 day, and then that goes into oak as opposed to where the other two juices go. Did I get that correct?
Correct. So the first two, we think about stainless steel. And then to give us that third option, we go into neutral French oak.
Awesome. And is that a formula that you have, or is that something that you look at the grapes when you get them back and decide I need a third?
Actually, neither. It's really just about experimenting. Every one of our rosés year to year has a different approach, and there's really currently I feel like this is going to be vintage number 8 for us.
Yeah.
And there is still really no rhyme or reason. We bring in the grapes and we make a lot of last minute decisions based on color, taste, all around vintage, weather, and what we have access to. We know that we always use stainless steel. We have access to like really beautiful barrels. It just depends on the percentage and what goes into what. And
yeah.
So
you are making decisions based on that year, and as you said, the color and stuff like that. This is how we're going to do it. And for this year, for last year, for this vintage, it was a third. So.
And I think we're getting better at decisions. We were actually, my harvest intern Cassidy and I were chatting earlier. We've actually made some pretty big plans for this harvest. And I don't think we've ever done that before. So I feel like we're in pretty good shape. And this is the first time that we've had things dialed in. We're like, oh, I know what we're going to do.
Oh.
which is pretty amazing. But everything starts with the vineyard. We're really lucky to work with this source, and it's special. Absolutely.
Okay, great. So what are your tasting notes on this wine then? So you've heard a group of us describe it. How do you describe this wine?
Carignan that comes in as rosé always, for me is underripe watermelon. There's no greenness, but there is the high tone, really lean fruit that you can find from that. Pomegranates, rhubarb. There's a hint of like lavender and fennel. For me, that's like really lean Carignan characteristics.
Mm-hmm. And I'm really to relate this to some of the other producers we've had. We had in May, we had Tony Couturier on, and we were drinking his Carignan from Mendocino as well, up in Ukiah. And,
yes,
and
he's great.
And Tony's comment was Carignan is his desert island wine. If he can only have one grape for the rest of his life, he wants to drink Carignan. And I think this goes to show the versatility of the grape and how it's rapidly turning into one of the favorites of the California natural wine producers.
Well, I think first and foremost, it represents California's or Northern California's history. There's no way around it. When I think of California, I think of Carignan. Clearly Sonoma has its style and its varietals that they really embrace, and Napa Valley is Cabernet, but when you go up to Mendocino and you start working and talking to growers who, are 5th, 6th generations in, and they have, Carignan that was planted in the late 1800s, that is California's viticultural history. So, it's kind of a snapshot of what people were drinking over 100 years ago on their table up in the mountains in California as they're just starting to settle the state. So it's exciting that these vines are still around. This is an important part of history, and we have access to them now. And most of these vineyards have been farmed without chemicals since day one. So that's very special.
Yeah. So what do you think it's going to take for Mendocino Carignan to achieve the same cachet or recognition as a Napa Cab or as a Sonoma Pinot Noir or something like that?
A celebrity.
A celebrity?
Yeah.
Okay. So the next question is, how do we turn Jason into a celebrity?
You know, I mean, I think in small circles within, like, I think the very, like, our small circle here, we like recognize the importance of this varietal and like how it tastes, and like it's beyond what it tastes like. Okay, this has history and depth, and this makes up our state. But you know, I mean, you know, you think about where Napa, you know, this was like a mid-90s like cult phenomenon, and like big writers, and it's a lot of money in marketing. And will that be pushed towards Carignan? I actually hope not, you know. So let's I mean, it will no longer be a $30 rosé.
Yeah. Let's keep it amongst ourselves, right? If that's
I mean, fast forward to 2 years and it's, you know, it's going to be a $120 wine.
Yeah, $120 rosé from Mendocino. I think that would be absolutely. I think that would be absolutely fantastic if we had that high, like that range of natural wines from California as well, because there certainly are crazy. Not crazy. Crazy is not the right word, but there certainly are very expensive natural wines coming in from Europe that are not well-known varietals, or not really popular varietals. Like, you know, like $100 for a Zabibo Muscadet is just not an uncommon thing anymore, which was unheard of 3 years ago.
Oh, I just think of some of like the really, really fun Austrian producers, you know, Stephanie and Edward from Guttegal and Christian Schida, and like, you know, these are expensive wines.
Totally.
You know?
Totally. Like the Italian wines from Lacoste, right? They're coming in, they're all $80. It's really, these are not like your average, you know, natural wine niche, you know, for, you know, they're not your every night wines, so to speak.
But I think it's a good thing for the industry. I don't think, you know, there definitely should be a range, but boutique, you know, if you're a small producer and you're charging that much, it's, you know, you have bills to pay, and you have a family, and you're farming, and it makes sense.
Absolutely. So how about a little bit of background on yourself, though? So how did you get into winemaking, and then specifically natural wine?
Completely by accident. I think like most producers, you know, you end up in California. I ended up here just actually really wanting to be part of this industry. You know, I came out here from New York City, and I was slowly learning about the wine industry through the sales channel and hospitality, and just was a little burnt out, and wanted to find a new path, and ended up here, and felt right away just this beautiful connection to farming, and to the production, and to, you know, the people that were living out here and working in the industry, the community. So that happens in 2013, and, you know, fast forward, I pretty much just put my head down and worked as much as I could. And, you know, I spent time between Napa and Bordeaux, which really weren't, you know, benchmark places for natural wine, but they were definitely places where I could learn the basics, the classic, the structure, you know, to get a foundation of winemaking, and to kind of like jump off and make my own decisions based on style. And, you know, I was always involved in the arts, and, you know, I think I approached everything from a very minimal point of view. So it was natural for me to look at this style of winemaking as a place for me to call home.
Yeah.
So
who was your natural wine mentor?
There really was none.
Oh.
Yeah. You know, my mentors were actually in Bordeaux and Napa Valley, and, you know, we were minimalists, but we were definitely making structured wines that would appeal to the point system, which there's definitely nothing wrong with that. It I'm not making wines like that, but it taught me a lot. And that was where I basically learned winemaking. And then from there, I just made my own decisions.
No. So you're one of the few producers that are in Berkeley, so you're in that nice little Berkeley kind of, I guess, niche near Brock and Donkey and Goat and a few other producers as well. So what's that little ecosystem like being in Berkeley?
It's a lot of fun. They're incredibly supportive. I probably would have never found this place if it weren't for Jared and Tracy from Donkey and Goats. I kind of planted the seed with them a couple years ago at Raw LA. And I think we were all like maybe at Bar Bandini hanging out. And, I was making wine up in Sonoma, and, we had this kind of long conversation. It was late. We were all like having a lot of fun, but I was like, I just want to move. I live in Oakland. My wife and daughter and I, we live and we've been in Oakland for a while. And we're trying to figure out how to like bring production closer to home. And I think Jared and Tracy, like right away, like that stuck with them. They remembered that a space opened up, and right away I think they reached out to me the day after Christmas, and they're like, we have a space for you. And I was like, all right. So very quickly I moved in here, and the community was already established. I was very lucky to be able to just plug in, because I know they worked very hard over the past decade to create this. So I was lucky, and they're great people. I moved in, and we share equipment, we share staff at times, we drink a lot of beer together. There's a lot of food, they barbecue. It's really nice, because I've worked up in Napa, and at times it doesn't feel like there's much of a community, where everyone's very isolated and focused on their own goal. And sometimes things feel very secretive, where here I feel like it's one big kind of reality show. We all know what's going on, and we take care, and we're having fun, and it's a true community.
Yeah, fantastic. We're looking forward to one of the things about our club, which again, we don't have the full membership here, but we're waiting for this COVID to end, and this distancing to end. We're going to start doing some class trips. We're going to start doing some field trips too. So we'll come visit you in North Berkeley with, hopefully 2 dozen people, which would be a lot of fun.
That'd be great.
As well. So I want to ask you then about, we're talking about shelter in place and COVID. There's a lot in the fires. There's a lot of different directions we can go in to, but let's talk about, I know you started Harvest already. Tell us a little bit about the difference between, like, how did you prepare for Harvest differently? I know you have interns now. How are you being safe, and what's different about this Harvest, even before the fires or prepping for this, than prior harvests?
That's a really good question, because last year was my first year in this space, and I operate a very small production. 9 months out of the year, I'm a one-man show. So we have this really incredible woman that joined us August 1st, Cassidy, and we're essentially a 2-person team working here. And, I guess we live in somewhat of a bubble. We've all been tested. We come here, we go home, we work. I think we operate relatively safely. I think it's different in a much bigger scenario. But the reality is, when we go test vineyards and we harvest, we are kind of mixing in with vineyard crews and in different communities. And, I think everywhere we go, people are trying to be aware, and there's masks and social distancing. And so I don't think we went into it with like a checklist of things to be safe. I think we've already been prepped months prior to this, and like what the way of life looked like and how we walk and talk and act. And so it was a pretty seamless transition. And, you know, we're just trying to bring fruit in and be safe and make the best wine possible and be creative.
Yeah.
But I think it doesn't feel abnormal at all.
Yeah.
You know,
I would say the one difference that I've observed just from my other friends up in Sonoma is, you know, harvest time had more of a feeling up here, especially last year, of it's like an Amish barn raising. It's like, hey, who can help pick or who can help if they don't have a professional crew to come do it. And now that part's changed, because now people are like, we're only given a small group to pick. We're gonna socially isolate, mask, take care of everything. So there aren't as many opportunities for people who want to pick this year and be part of harvest, unless they do some social isolation or some dedicated harvest work. So then that's just an anecdote from a couple of the people I've spoken to. So that's one of the differences that I've seen. Not sure if you've seen very similar things.
Yeah, they're tighter teams, tighter crews. Unfortunately, some people have disappeared, you know, that maybe were a little bit older and, you know, shouldn't be working or high risk, you know. So there's a few things to think about, there's no doubt labor is a big issue this year. Yeah. That's one of the biggest issue. You know, we're trying to schedule picks right now. We're kind of fighting against smoke taint, the potential of smoke taints in certain regions, and vineyard owners being overwhelmed by the number of picks that they have to get done day by day, and not enough crew. So it's challenging. I think we're going to get through it. I think we're going to look back at this. I mean, the vineyard, the vintage isn't lost. I've heard some of these. I've read some of these theories. You know, look, we've been dealing with fire since 2017. This is year number 4. I'm pretty sure that most growers and most winemakers at this point have a really serious plan on how to salvage this. And there are ways when you bring fruit in, whether you go carbonic or destem or make rosé or just are very light on the macerations. You know, I don't think I've drank many smoke tainted wines in the past 3-4 years, and we've had fires every year.
Yeah,
So
I think
we've gotten really good.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest differences I heard, especially the big fire in 2017, is that happened in mid to late October, and most of the pick was done by then. At least all the whites were picked already, and some of the reds were sort of like in midstream. But this came much earlier than the last few years, and that's, I think, and I think you even said it yourself, like you're changing your picking strategy and your production strategy. So, and you mentioned, so, you know, you have 3 years under your belt now. So what are some of the techniques that this earlier fire is, you know, are you incorporating into this year's vintage?
Yeah, so I feel like we're pretty lucky. We work, you know, 95% of our grapes are coming from northern Mendocino, which on average, when you go up there right now, there's little or no haze at all. Mm-hmm. There are no fires in Mendocino. You know, we get a little bit of a drift from like the Wahlberg fire, maybe the Hennessy fire, but it's very low. I do have a small vineyard in Calistoga that we're working with. We've just pulled samples. We've taken them to ETS to sample for smoke taint. It's a real concern. You know, we love this vineyard. We love the grower. We don't want to leave anyone hanging. We don't want to leave fruit hanging. You have to make it work. So there are a few options to bypass smoke taint in the winery if you choose to pick the fruit. You can make.
Sorry, Jason, to interrupt, but you mentioned the test for smoke taint. What are they testing for when they're analyzing for smoke taint?
You know, that's a really good question. There are some really like details. I don't work at ETS. I'm not a lab.
Okay.
Basically, you know, they're the pros. They're the scientists. You know, we bring in, but what they do require is for us to take a Ziploc baggie and to fill that bag up with 400 grapes, little berries across the board, full berries. No, you don't squeeze them. You don't create any juice. 400 berries. So we've already done that. We've given them the samples. Believe it or not, they are so overwhelmed right now in Napa Valley with smoke taint tests that if you drop off a bag, you're not going to get results for another week to 10 days.
Wow. And you're simultaneously, when you're picking those 400 grapes, you're also doing a bricks test to figure out, when you want to pick as well.
And we're really close. We need to be picking soon. So.
Yeah. And how big, using your hands, 400 grapes seems like a lot. It seems like a few, how big of a bag are we talking about?
It's like, it's like a half a gallon.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So
just
half a Ziploc. Okay. Seems like
that.
Seems like a lot. I'm just picturing in my head somebody picking out 400 grapes and then accidentally squeezing one. We're like, oh, God damn it.
Yeah. So it's, this is where we're at. But I mean, it's smoke taint will be there for sure in some vineyards and other vineyards. Right now, I've been kind of calling up friends of mine that have much more experience than I do, who've worked, for 20, 30 years, have seen everything, and they're still basically where they're at. They're not only being optimistic, they're realists, and their theory is it's 50-50. There's no rhyme or reason. Nobody truly understands how smoke taint will affect a wine in its youth and in its future. We've seen vineyards that were side by side. One had smoke taint, the other did not. There was no rhyme or reason. People really don't understand this. I think some scientists in Australia probably have a better idea and they're dialing that in. But right now we have an incredible team trying to analyze this, and we still don't have any answers. That's the reality.
Yeah. No, so I can just imagine now that you're you pick these grapes, you're measuring the bricks, you're like, we're really close to picking any day now, but we're not going to get our smoke taint results back for a week or so. That must drive a little anxiety and uncertainty.
A little bit, but I think after everything we've gone through this year with COVID and shelter in place and wineries being shut down, it almost feels like a big joke at this point, where we're just like, I don't expect control. It's going to work out in one way or another, or maybe it won't, but I'm not going to lose sleep over it. We know that we have a lot of incredible fruit up in Mendocino that is going to come in and make beautiful rosé and beautiful red. And we're just going to go with it. And, I think everyone's going to take some losses this year in the wine industry. But the reality is, I think as a society, we've all taken losses already. This has been a rough year, and I think we're not jaded, but we're just kind of like, all right, this is a little nuts. And, we're heading into a big election year. So it's like, all right, let's just.
Yeah. Especially in a bunch of the wine regions right now, especially Napa and Northern Sonoma right now, the way I sum it up is that a perfectly way to sum up 2020 in California is that there are people who are simultaneously under shelter in place and evacuation orders. And that kind of sums it up perfectly for me. What are you going to do? Right? You're just going to have to, do your best, get through it. And, you're going to have obviously you have techniques that you can use or ways to make wine to get the best product out. And luckily, as you said, or not luckily, by design, you have great fruit and great grapes from up in Mendocino. So coaxing out the right, the right product, I think is part of where your skill set comes in.
Yeah, I think it's just being flexible, being creative. I feel really lucky. I still get to make wine in this environment. I'm healthy. It's like we're all here sitting, drinking wine. We don't have COVID. I think we're all doing okay. Right. It's like, this vintage is going to be okay. Next year is going to be very different.
So so you're early. So now that you've done a bunch of picks already, and you said get creative and stuff like that. As you look at what's going on in your warehouse right now, where's some of the creativity, or what do you see yourself doing a little differently this year than you've done in past years?
Well, we power washed our floors yesterday. That felt. Sometimes just like doing like a deep clean feels good. Just like it felt like, okay, like I think we're ready now. I don't know what the hell's going on, but our floors are clean. It's like we're ready for anything now. But I think we're pretty dialed in. Like we have barrels, steams ready to go. We're going to do a lot of barrel fermentations. We have a lot of stainless steel in this year, like just waiting for rosé. For us, I think our ready is we have some Cabernet coming in from Moon Mountain that I think is going to be clean, and I'm excited to make some like really pretty Moon Mountain Cabernet, and that's about 7 days out. But right now we have in the house, we have some awesome like Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc from beautiful properties that were picked perfectly, that we were able to be thoughtful. Those are like happily going through native fermentations. And now we're waiting. Like we're trying to be as hands-on as possible with our growers in the vineyards so that we can be there and helpful, because I feel like our growers are being a little overwhelmed right now with the circumstances. They're living up in wine country. There's a lot of smoke. It's hard on everyone. And I feel like as long as we can go up there and have this open line of communication, we're all going to be successful.
Yeah, I like it. It's like a winemaker's jujitsu, right? You take the energy that comes your way and you just produce the best product you can with it. So I really like that attitude. Fantastic. So we have to ask you, and it's in the chat, about the art. This art. Who made the label? I'm trying to get who made the label, and let's talk about this. This is fantastic.
Thank you. So I grew up in Michigan, very small town. When I was young, I used to be very into the electronic music scene in Detroit, and I have a lot of friends that are connected to the industry. And as I grew up and ended up staying there for college, I met this incredible gentleman, Michael China, and he was a pretty important artist. I mean, he was working with labels out of Detroit and London and Berlin, doing record labels and graphic design and branding, and we stayed in touch. And I've always followed his work, and I always loved it.
Sorry to interrupt. Is there a particular record label that was more mainstream that we may recognize?
He did a lot of work for Ghostly Records out of Ann Arbor, Detroit. He was working a lot with Warp Records.
Okay. Who are the artists? Is anything?
Big ones out of Detroit were like Matthew Deere. That's maybe the big one. I'm trying to think. Warp Records.
I'll look him up. And then does he have an Instagram account?
He does. Michael China.
Michael China. Okay, we'll circulate that. I'll post it and tag him for that. So fantastic.
Yeah. Last name is spelled C-I-N-A. Michael.
Oh, fantastic. So Bridget, who's also on here, Bridget works in an art gallery. So we're very much into, we talk a lot about the artists, the labels as well, because I've said this before to other producers, like I get really sad when I see really nice art and then people recycle the bottle, because there's some way that this should be saved for somehow as a memory, but keeping the labels are tough. But so what's Michael doing these days?
So a few years ago, he moved to Minneapolis. He got married. He had kids. He opened up a design studio, and he's just full-time creating art. So he kind of balances it between this like very creative output of of artwork, and then also balances it with some like really beautiful creative like big projects that he might do a rebrand for like Adobe or Facebook or Google.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So and thank you, Lauren, put in the chat chinaart.com or China Art, CINA art.com. So we'll link that in the notes as we'll say. So yeah. And what was the inspiration for the design? Do you have?
Yeah. So, I had an idea. I did not know how to creatively, visualize it. So, he was kind of the first person that I chatted with to talk through everything. And I had an idea of what Carignan would taste like and what our approach would be. And I wanted that to translate to a visual image on the bottle, whether it be the vineyard, the varietal, the tasting notes. So I basically created a visual mood board from the vineyard, from soil samples, all the way down to like writing notes, whether it be like notes or if you want to call it like poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Gave it to him, and then he sat with it and created this piece of artwork.
Oh,
for the
do you have a
Carignan.
photo of that mood board somewhere?
I might, yeah. It's a few, we're talking back 2013, but I definitely have it. Absolutely.
Okay, no, that's fantastic. I love the idea of putting the mood board, poetry, and everything, and giving all of that inner self and belief to an artist, and say, now you create something out of this. I think that's one of the things that's interesting to me is to see the evolution. It won't help us understand the mind of the artist, but it'll see where they started and where they ended, and then at least make up our own stories to fill the gaps.
Absolutely.
And that could be a fun process as well. No, that's fantastic. No, it's beautiful art, and we really are definitely art appreciatives here as well.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to go back, and I know Lauren also loves the mood board, right? So Lauren, you had a question. You want to go back to the beginning. Would you want to ask your question about the wine process?
This is Stephanie typing and doing everything, by the way. Like, I agree with
All right, it's your account.
I feel like I'm taking false claim to
Okay, so thank you, Stephanie, for China Art. Thank you, Stephanie, for loving the mood board. It's under your account, though. So I like the fact that actually Stephanie's gaslighting all of us on you, and you're right next to each other. So that's sort of what. No, sorry, not gaslighting, catfishing. She's catfishing.
Just like you seem like so much more of an interesting artistic person, and it's just like I'll take the blame, but no.
Okay, so now Lauren, you had a question about the wine production.
Stephanie did.
Stephanie did. I'm sorry. Stephanie had a question.
Yeah, I was curious, like, with your 3:3:3 ratio, like you had talked about experimenting with it, and I was wondering what other ratios you've tried and what the differences were and what you found out.
Yeah, so the year before, 2018, the ratio was bring in the fruit, don't foot tread, don't use barrels, direct press, stainless steel. It's a really pretty wine. It's incredibly high tone, high acid. And I realized that it took a very long time to really mellow out in bottle. And for me, that was maybe not something I wanted to achieve with a rosé, considering that you release it so early. And for a lot of winemakers and for myself, you release a rosé because you're excited about the vintage. It's the first kind of showpiece of that vintage, and it's meant to kind of start like driving sales. And I created a wine that did not do any of that.
Okay. So can you elaborate on what does it mean when you say when a rosé takes a long time to mellow in a bottle? Like, what are you doing to taste, and what are you looking for before you say this is ready for release?
It has plenty of fruit, it has acidity, everything's integrated as it should be. And, when you put things direct press straight into stainless steel, they're pretty. There's a lot of tension, and there's a lot of high tone acidity, and it needs time to mellow out, and that time only comes from age and bottle.
Yeah.
So when you put things, you start thinking about like foot treading and bringing in like more fruit phenolics, and you start thinking about putting into neutral French oak. These are all things that round a wine, make things softer and more approachable. And I think there needs to be a balance for a rosé for it to be successful and to be drinkable. And I think 2019 is like, I figured out the ratio. I might do it completely differently this year. I could like screw it up.
Why not?
Or like all over again.
I like the transition from brutalist to something a little softer.
Yeah. It's, I mean, for me, look, I produce maybe 3,500 cases a year. I feel that I have the flexibility to experiment year in, year out without losing people. I feel like when people buy the wines, they do expect some sort of creativity to be defined by what's, what they're having, what they're drinking. We're not a big brand. We don't need to be uniform or polished. I want to make the best possible wines, but I want to feel free at doing that. And I feel like most consumers are looking for that in their experience. So I think it's a perfect fit, and we'll see what happens this year. I do like the 2019 rosé. I think it is really special. So I imagine that it's going to be very similar.
Yeah, I personally, I love the creaminess and the mallow on it. It's just like that to me is like, it's so bold as a rosé. So that is what's really appealing to me. But I don't think it's interesting what you said as well, is that, as a winemaker, you also have goals, and one of your goals is to get the rosé on the market quicker, and doing it entirely in stainless doesn't allow you to do that. So there is some personal release goals that are, tied to the portfolio that are also important to understand of why people are doing this.
Yeah, I mean, it's still, at the end of the day, it's still a small business, and we have to pay bills, and and we have to sell wine, and we have to get people excited about it, and they need to be showing well. And if I release a rosé that my distributors tell me that they need to sit on for another 6-7 months, then I think I might have made a wrong decision.
Yeah. And that's I think it's a good, I haven't really heard that description that you meant, that like the rosé is the early release for the other vintages. So I hear like that's very interesting, because I hadn't heard that expressed before. So is that an indication that if somebody enjoys a particular producer's rosé, that they should be really keen to follow up on the red wines and the later later releases of that vintage?
Absolutely. I think across the board for most of the wines. I mean, I think that's a great indicator of fruits and density. And there's no doubt, if the rosé is really good, and upon spring release, a lot of those reds that are to follow, I think we're pretty lucky living in California. It's rare that we have a bad vintage. We're always blessed with plenty of sunshine. This year's gonna be a little tricky, but I think it's very regional. I mean, but we're usually pretty blessed, and we can make very different picking decisions, and we can wait well into the fall, and we can make beautiful high acid wines. We can make dense wines with plenty of structure. So there's a range, but there's no doubt that rosé in the springtime is a perfect indicator of how that vintage settled up.
That's really interesting. Something to look forward to next year, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great insight.
Yeah, that was your insight. I just listened. I love it.
I'm trying.
It's actually one of my favorite thoughts to do, because part of this is, I'm not a you know, I've obviously been drinking wine for a long time, and I've had a very interest in wine, and you can tell by my questions that I really geek out on it as well. But part of this process and meeting producers is not only connecting who makes it, producers to the consumers, is it's also part of all of our learning journeys. And you pick up these little anecdotes from everyone we talk to, and that's a big takeaway for me today, which is really valuable, I think, for all of our wine knowledge and experience growth. So,
hey, Chris, I have one question, maybe for you and everyone that's there.
Sure.
So we are looking at doing a project that it's a fruit fermentation. So we have access to some like old vine pears, and also access to some really beautiful Chardonnay. And I know over the past couple of years, like this like blended fruit fermentation has started to hit the market, maybe on the east side of the States. What's the interest like if we were to make like a semi-sparkling, like a pet nat out of like grapes and fruits? Is that there, or would people want to drink that? Low alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
So let's go to Mick and Bridget first, because they were thumbs upping, and
I was raising the roof.
they were thumbs upping and raising the roof. So Mick and Bridget, what are your thoughts on a mixed fruit pet nat?
I mean, that sounds incredible. Yeah, that sounds right up our alley. That is exactly the kind of thing that we would like to drink.
Yeah, I generally call my favorite natty wines are the juiciest, so the juicier the better.
Yeah.
That sounds
awesome.
Yeah. And I really see, like, I noticed that a lot of natural wine producers also started making a lot of ciders as well. So that starts to become really interesting. And I think people are just looking for interesting and different experiences. So it's not like, you know, people are poo-pooing plum wine or pear wine or something else, but at the end of the day, if it tastes good and it's responsibly grown, I think people are going to be receptive to it. But again, it also depends on the price point as well. So if that's what it takes, I think it'll be really interesting. So we'll go to Lauren and Stephanie. What are your thoughts on a mixed fruit pet nat and wine?
Love it.
So into it.
That would be really interesting. And
so would it be kind of like between like a traditional sparkling wine and a Lambrusco, just like that kind of thing? Like, what do you mean when you say mixed fruit?
Yeah, so it's going to be 50% pears from an old vineyard.
Oh, fruit, not just grapes fruit. Got it. Okay.
Cool.
So different. We're crossing. Well, is it species? It's Venus vinifera and.
I'm into it. Yeah. I think that would be great. I did pick up the Tony the Katori cider. I picked up a bottle of it and it was delightful. So I'm sure
the Katori cider is phenomenal. It's absolutely amazing. They're one of the ones that we've seen that we've had right up. But yeah, we're starting to see a lot more of that. Seen a lot of more ciders coming out of Oregon as well. There's a lot of things going on there. But yeah, I think Jason, to answer your question, I think a lot of us are into it. You know, it's one of those
delicious.
I would start with a small batch and get it out there, and I'm happy to help get the message out or help do some things with it.
I think my Aunt Carol would really enjoy it, and it would be an in for her into natural wine and in general. So that's my 2 cents.
Aunt Carol would love it.
Aunt Carol would be really into it.
Well, you know what? Aunt Carol's gonna get the first bottle.
Yeah.
Aunt Carol will be very enthusiastic.
I think it would be, so one of the interesting things is, like, part of your early, I grew up with Italian wine on the table, like a classic New Jersey Italian family with the Santa Margherita Pinot Grigio and the Rufino Chianti on the table every day since I was like 8 years old. You know, but then also, you move into New York City like I did right after college, and one of the classic things, like, you have no money, you go to Chinese restaurants and they give you free plum wine. And mean hangovers, but man, you drank a lot of it. So, and at the time it was delicious. Now I probably wouldn't drink it, but I think it's just people are into trying new things and experimenting. So,
Absolutely.
So we'll come to Tim. You're blinking on and off. So what do you, Jessica and Elena, think about a pear grape wine?
No.
No.
That was her thought.
That's
Nothing.
a hard no.
You're talking about wine made with fruit?
Yeah.
So adding fruit to grapes, like to wine?
So basically the premise is we work with this incredible old vine property up in Redwood Valley that has a bunch of really beautiful Chardonnay, but the farmer also farms old vine organic pears. And so I know there's currently a lot of like fruit pet nuts being made out in the East Coast and Vermont and Long Island. So I was thinking to create some sort of hybrid where we pick the pears, we pick the Chardonnay at the same time, we press it off, we go to barrel, we put it into bottle, we crown cap it, and we create this really beautiful 8% alcohol, essentially fruit juice out of Chardonnay.
You know this?
Pears.
What is that?
It's just called Art and Science. So I don't know if you can see the label, but it is literally half grapes, half apples.
What do you think?
Apple. It's called Symbiosis, Art plus Science.
So what do you think about it, Tim?
This was actually really good. If you can make something that tastes as good as this, it was like dry cider stuff.
My mind's blown. We just asked you about half grape, half fruit, and you guys shot it down right away. We were like, nope. But
Okay, I also have to be like the people who are drinking sangria at the beginning are like, fruit, wine, no.
Yeah.
Comes from a loving place.
Exactly. So you guys were just like, you were a hard no, and you're like, oh, but I'm drinking that.
I love it.
This is what we're drinking, actually.
Drinking it.
So if it was wine with added fruit to it, no. If it's being fermented together and it's like complex and dry and not something some tweeny bopper is going to get a hangover off of, then totally down to try it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
There you go. We've got a couple of things.
This art plus science, they did a good job. I literally just opened.
That's funny, Jake.
Humble cider. It's really nice, and they're about really nice label art.
Yeah, your first hard no is actually drinking your future product already. So I think they're telling you
as long as you can do it as good as they do.
Yeah.
You were like,
I liked that one.
Yeah, as long as you don't mess it up, they're on board.
Yeah.
Like, just do a good job.
Don't fuck it up.
Good. I'm in. Yeah. Oh, great.
don't make it sweet. Don't make it like
No
hyper
pressure.
Sweet.
Yeah. No.
Is there a brand name that you're already conceived of that you're working on?
Probably fruit.
I have one name, but it's probably I can't talk about it now.
Yeah.
Oh, you're too worried we're gonna go behind your back and steal this idea.
I thought the brand name was gonna be Vinca Minor, but apparently it's gonna be a different logo.
I see what you did there.
Well, if Michael China isn't available, I would offer my services.
Yeah.
Graphic designer.
Thank you.
Happily
This
to
is
collaborate
Stephanie,
with
by the way,
Bridget.
not Lauren.
Good on you, lady. That's awesome.
All right. So there you go. So this is your first focus group, Jason. So I think there's
free samples for life.
3, 4, 5. There's 7 of us who are like, yeah, we'd love to try it, and see where it goes. And you have people who are drinking fruit, drinking ciders, drinking a lot of different things. I'm always just curious about how well it's going to catch on, because the only anecdote I have for that is that, there's a couple bottles here and there that tend to catch on, but I know with the natural wine movement, a lot of people started to there are a lot of small producers for mead who are trying to make like natural mead fermented out of locally grown honey. And I see it, and I see them trying to pour and sample in the Whole Foods, and I see occasionally them at some of the natural wine or outside near there, but mead just hasn't caught on. right? It's like maybe it's still early, maybe they're still trying to.
It has on the East Coast though. Like I
What is
have
that?
like a lot of friends that drink mead on the regular basis. On the East Coast.
So where is that?
In like DC and New York area.
Okay.
It's really weird because I have every friend I've talked to, I'm like, what are you? What? Like, are you at a Renaissance fair? Like,
and I'm not sure. Is it gonna go mainstream? Is it gonna be like IPAs, or is it gonna be like it's gonna be like sour beer, where someone like Mick is like, this is exactly what I like, but the 99 other beer drinkers are not into sour beers. So it's just one of those. We'll see.
Well, here's the big thing is I think what we've seen clearly, we're year 4 into fires that roll into California. We're also seeing climate change. Are we on the razor's edge of climate change? Maybe not, but we're seeing the effects. And there are varietals that no longer can be produced as they should in Northern California and California, but these apple trees and fruit trees are still thriving. And so I think more and more we're going to see a hybrid, and that could be mainstream, in 5 years from now, in 10 years. Will it continue to be, could it be in Safeway? Probably not. But I think for us, like in the natural wine world, like mainstream is just small scale success, where the people that we love, the people that we're friends with, that are consuming, they're telling their friends about it, they're continually supporting small independent producers and small independent restaurants. That's success right there. And I think that's a small movement that will continue to grow. And I think we're starting to see that in other parts of the country. And, right now we're dominated by this incredible grape wealth here in California, but things are changing very quickly.
Yeah,
and
100%.
Yeah.
Again, and I don't think any of us want to be, and when I say, I don't think anyone is looking for anything mainstream, right?
Yeah.
So it's not, mainstream is not, I mean, I would love all wine to be made natural. I would love no pesticides, all organic farm. I would absolutely love that. But that's a pipe dream, right? It's still going to be, natural wine is still less than 1% of the industry. At its biggest growth in 20 years and maybe 5%. I just don't see it getting past that by any stretch. So where is but to your point, Jason, is like, is that niche going to be big enough to be a sustainable business for the producer? Or is it going to be one SKU off the 10 other SKUs of natural wine that you have, right? So if you have 9 natural wine SKUs and one wine and pear or wine and apple SKU, that's a different story. Like that's kind of that's what I was thinking about when I was reacting to that.
Yep.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I think, where, especially for natural wine, where dessert wines are, right? There are very few ports in the natural wine world or really sweet, like we don't have that, those really sweet dessert type wines in the natural wine world. And part of it is they're really expensive to produce, But the other part is I just don't think there's much of a demand because, as someone else just said here, I think Lauren said, it's like, just don't make it sweet, right? Most people don't like sweet wines.
I agree.
Okay, so we're just about the hour. Are there any final questions or what other questions do you have for Jason before we wrap up?
I think, Chris, you kind of alluded to it when you were talking about like a field trip, but do you have like a tasting room or a facility that we can visit when visiting places is possible again?
Yeah, we do have a tasting room. We also, right now, we were just authorized by the city of Berkeley that we could kind of do outdoor seating and tastings. So, for example, this Friday and Saturday, we're going to have tables outside. So feel free, swing by. I'll have a lot of wine open, and we're open. We're serving people outside right now.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
We definitely have
That's
some
fantastic.
beer waiting for us.
I'm aware that you were serving people outside, so maybe that could be one of the first Leporella's field trips to Berkeley.
Are you
Yeah.
next to like Donkey and Go and Brock? Are you in the same area?
Same block.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Just
Absolutely.
happy.
Same block. We could do it. We could do a little bit of a bar crawl.
I want to do a hop. A
Yeah.
little hop.
Yeah.
So here's a question: is what wines should Chris include in the next batch? That maybe I don't know if you get his shipments, but he hasn't used, or like, what are some natural wines that you're like, oh my God, you guys have to try this?
Chris, are you only working with California producers? Are you?
No, I'm working with. I've been trying to focus on California producers since COVID, partly to support California, partly to make it easy to have these virtual tastings. But I do work with producers all over the world. So I've had, South American, a lot of European wines as well in every mix. But I'm leaning towards having, at least during this time, the California producers.
Yeah, so I would.
We lost you there for a moment.
Oh, sorry. So there's a gentleman that's living in Long Island, and he's farming apples, he's farming grapes, he's making beautiful Cabernets, he's making hybrids. Eric Lombard from Floral Terrains. I would say, hands down for me, he's probably making the most exciting wines right now domestically. And his production's incredibly small. By day, he's a school teacher. So right now he's like, his kids are being homeschooled, but he has a small warehouse, a barn on Long Island, I think making.
What makes them so interesting?
I've just never tasted wines like this before. I think with what he's been given on Long Island and his kind of dedicated passion for seeking out the cultural history of maybe apple farming and grape growing on Long Island and turning them into like very natural, stable, delicious products. It's insane. I mean, he just sent me some like these hybrids and some Cabernets, some whole cluster fermentations. Some of the best wines I've ever had in my life. Hands down. Yeah.
See, Chris, now you got your work cut out for you.
I know. I'm gonna look it up. So awesome. So why don't we? Let's all give Jason a round of applause and thank him for joining us. All right.